Greetings, everyone. This is the sixth episode of the Mandalorian review, and I right now I have Rolling Chairs with me. How you doing, Rolling Chairs?
Hello, hello. Good to be here.
This episode, as I understand, had a lot of people bailing. Now, I saw the comments on social media, and I didn't really give it any sort of thought one way or the other. I thought, okay, this is going to be a divisive episode. And I can see why people were very frustrated with it. I saw why a lot of people were bailing on it. As I, well, honestly, if I was not reviewing this, I would be bailing on this story at this point. It is a very difficult episode, kind of to take in, and the more you think about it, the more kind of frustrating it gets when you start to think about the implications of what transpires in this episode. So, right now we have already traveled in this season alone. We have already traveled back and forth from the Mandalorian outpost. We've gone on adventures with Bo-Katan. We've followed Din as he kind of jumps around the place trying to figure out how to redeem himself on Mandalore, which is already a fairly good improvement from previous seasons where it was just him doing bounty hunting one-off missions of where he'd show up, do a bounty hunting mission, and then move on. So it makes sense why they have shaken things up, because that original model just wasn't working for the story going forward. It may have been entertaining for a season or two. It gets tiring really fast, and so they had to do something different. Well, they definitely did do something different, but unfortunately, it came at a pretty big cost when you think about the story as a whole. Now, I don't know where they're going with the story necessarily as a whole, but I do know that there's one plot point that they do want us to remember over and over again, and that is this is about the Mandalorian's quest to retake Mandalore. So, with that sort of understanding of where this story is kind of going, that's why this episode kind of is a bit of a thorn. It's not pleasant. It doesn't give us any like really good information. It definitely does some good lore building, I will say that, but it was not done very well, and that's a shame, because I actually think that they could have come up with a much better story that would have been far more compelling in the long run. So with that, we are going to do what we have done in the past, and that is go through this episode piece by piece. But before we do that, Rolling Chairs, are there any sort of comments you want to give before we dive into this story?
Um, this show is no longer the Mandalorian. It's a story about an individual who's a part of the Mandalorian group, and this bounty that led him to Grogu and everything. It's completely changing to the Mandalorians, and Bo-Katan is now definitely the head of it. The show, they're definitely, like you said, they're building up to their not only the Mandalorians returning to Mandalore, building a new society, but they're obviously putting Bo-Katan at the head of it uh, without any consequence, like which we'll go into later. But yeah, the show has definitely changed a lot this season. But let's get into it.
All right, stand by just a second. Just remembered I want to pull up a reference before we dive into this. It's because the way this episode starts is a bit of a very unique one. Because we go back to the roots of the story, which is bounty hunting. And how does the episode start? It starts out with a squid face character floating in a tank of water. And it's not just any tank of water necessarily. It's like it's designed to hydrate them because this species does not do well in the open air. By the way, there actually is a background for this, why you would actually kind of have to have completely different ships for some of these characters, because they came from a different culture entirely that doesn't do well in air, let alone space. The calamari are one of these species, and unfortunately, Disney's approach to this was not as compelling as it could have been. The species that we currently see is right here, the squid faces are the quarren, species, if I remember right. They were the sworn enemies of the calamari, the what we typically know of as the fish face characters of the Star Wars universe. And with the calamari ships, the ones that they use in Star Wars, calamari. Wait, just say my bad. Let me pull up a reference image, because this makes a lot more sense when you see this.
Well, you're finding that. You find it already?
No, carry on.
I bet you everyone else in the crew who's like sitting around her in that tub, they're probably like so jealous. Like, what? She gets to sit in water and I'm sitting here drying out on this ship. They should have put like a little koi pond type thing that's just like in the ship, and then they can put a lid over it when they start flying crazy so it doesn't spill everywhere. So like whenever they're just chilling in space, they can just hop in there, take a quick dip, and then get back out onto their seat.
Yep.
I don't know.
All right, so
I don't know how practical that'd be, but
okay, here we go. Let me pull up this reference image. So the calamari had a ship that, they had shipyards that were creating ships for the Resistance, and these ships were the ones like this, the calamari cruiser. Very big ships, and they were, according to lore, very uncomfortable. The reason why is because it was actually designed for people to. It was designed for people of aquatic planets, and unfortunately for human species, this was a big irritation for them because it was very damp. It was very humid, because it was designed so that these creatures, these calamari creatures, wouldn't dry out or perish while they were traveling across the galaxy. Well, they also had a series of ponds, or like saunas, inside of these ships. And the reason why they had that is because while they were traveling, sure, the ship was of a different sort of build, and so it would be able to stand up. They would be able to survive a lot better on these ships than other vessels. But they still needed a chance to actually cool off and make sure to hydrate themselves. Thus, where they would have like these internal eco chambers, basically, where it's all trying to bring in elements of their planet, so they could have like the vegetation, have the water, have fish species, so that it felt like they were back home. Well, this is kind of similar to what they were trying to deal with. But the reason why this one makes no sense to me is that it's in the cockpit. They would have probably wanted to have this somewhere else. Now, another thing that's not really talked about too much, and I've only heard a few people mention it, and that is for this particular species, the quarren, they would have struggled very much to try and find any sort of opportunities across the galaxy. Why? Because they were sworn enemies with this creature. This creature right here, the Mon Calamari, basically were in an eternal conflict with the other species, the quarren, because these guys lived on the surface of the planet, and these guys lived towards the bottom levels of the ocean on their planet. They always had a feud going, and Star Wars kind of made certain that you always knew that this was the lesser of the two species. One went out into the stars, the other one made deals with like villains in order to help build up their empire. Well, correction, try and survive the Mon Calamari empire. So when we're seeing this, that's one thing. But as they're flying around, and this character is just floating there, not doing anything, just soaking in all the water, someone comes by and actually feeds this character with a fish. They just dump it into the tank, and then you watch this character ends up eating it. It's a really kind of a strange thing. It's like, you have to eat living fish. You have to go on the hunt. What are you, an animal? Not necessarily the most inspiring scene to begin with. Well, then we get to see this chamber disappear and a seat appear in its place, and we see an Imperial cruiser, and they start trying to speak in English. By the way, this creature's English is really refined. I don't think we've ever seen this species speak another language other than kind of their bubbling grunts, which it was because they couldn't really communicate like a normal way, and so it's kind of strange to see this very refined voice coming out of this character.
Well, in the Clone Wars, we do travel to this planet, and they do the same thing where they just sound like normal humans, which is they pulled it off in animation for the most part, but in live action it looked so off-putting. Like, it just did not connect. Like, it did not look like that voice could come out of those creatures or aliens, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, we find out that this Imperial cruiser is manned by Mandalorians. They are on hire, and they have come in order to take back a fugitive. And say, we don't know what you're talking about, sort of thing. And they're like, well, we know it. It's this Mon Calamari prince that is on there. And as they're having this discussion, out comes the Calamari prince and keeps saying over and over again, "I love you. Don't send me back."
He acts like a child.
He does act like a child.
And she acts like a 40-year-old woman. Like, it's a very weird relationship.
Well, it gets even odder because...
She even called it a childish fling.
Yeah. It gets even odder because of how they... Well, because with the lore. I mean, this is why writing with lore is so important. It was established several times over that these species are at odds with each other. They hate each other. What this is doing is it's undoing everything in the past and just kind of glazing over it moving forward. But what gets even more peculiar is that what they're insinuating with this relationship is actually a bit more questionable, but we'll dive into that in just a moment. What did you have to say, Rolling Chairs?
I can't remember the exact story of what it is, but I think they're trying to do that one kind of storyline where these two rival families are at each other's throats constantly, but then two of the younger people, climb over the wall to the other side to...
A very common story in many cultures. But why this gets really difficult with this one is because these are two different species. These are two different kinds entirely. I know why Disney's doing this. The same reason why they have a frog in love with a pig. It's because they're trying to show that love has all different kind of approaches. And it doesn't really matter who it is, just as long as you love them, and that will overcome any obstacle. Well, problem is with this story, this has some pretty messed up implications. See, when you're dealing with human on human, that's one thing, because that's getting past a prejudice. This is this is trying to go past a kind, and that there's something very unappealing to us in that. Jared Thorne correctly mentions that Rolling Chairs is referring to Romeo and Juliet. Yes, indeed. Bastion agrees. So, when you have creatures that are of different kinds falling in love, you have to remember that there is actually a biological reason why this doesn't make sense. See, here is something to kind of consider. You can have different people of different backgrounds, different cultures falling in love. That's not questionable. What becomes questionable is when you have something that is completely different from you, and then suddenly thinking that, oh, that thing's attractive. When you look at an alien from across the room and think, oh, that alien is attractive, I want to fall in love with them. That's where things start getting more messed up, because we as living creatures, honestly, we look for something that we can pair with, someone that is of our own kind, who is from the opposite side. We're not looking for something that's completely different than us. This becomes too difficult for our minds to even comprehend. So when they start pushing for this becomes unsettling, because you're thinking these are just, well, these characters are interacting in a way that is unnatural, that we in our world see it as unnatural, and when we see it in the Star Wars world, it's unnatural. Now, granted, there have been a few times beforehand where this has been referenced, and it was just kind of brushed off. It wasn't the focus of attention. It's more like these are the weirdos in the background. This puts it in our face, and we're supposed to want to side with these characters. I don't, but the audience is being designed to side with them. Is being presented in such a way of, oh, yes, we want to see love conquer all. Not realizing, you know what, Amon Calamari is going to want to find another fish face character. There's something in that character that they're going to see that they think, hey, this is going to be a good mate. They're not going to look at something and say, oh, that thing's going to be a good mate because it's completely different than me. They're going to look at it and say, okay, look, this character has wonderful eyes that reminds me of a relative, or maybe they have a very nice form that kind of fits with what the eyes of that creature is designed to look for. And they're not going to look for something that's, completely different than them. So that's a side note. But because they started with that in this episode, it's in your face, and you can't really just brush past it.
And it didn't even have good writing. Like, the whole thing was just kind of weird to see. Like, they've done this before in the Clone Wars. One of the clones, like, kind of defects and runs off from the army and starts a family on some planet that the war ends up finding its place too, and clones that are still part of the army find him, and he literally started a family with some alien. I don't know what species it is, but yeah, they literally start a family. But that was like, that was kind of wholesome. Like, they did it much better. Like, it was just, I don't know. They did it much better where you could actually like relate with the characters, and it felt very real because it was like a family and who were living on a farm. Father was trying to protect his land, type of thing, and it was just it landed much better there. With here, it was just kind of like cringe to like watch this whole thing, especially with the calamari dude acting like a kid and their weird voices. The whole thing was just kind of weird in this.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate that they did this, because honestly, this is where I checked out, like, mentally. I was like, okay, this is too far. I'm out. But of course, then I had to stay with it because that's what we're doing here. But this was like the point where it's like, okay, this has gone too far. I can tolerate a great many cinema kind of like gimmicks that they put in, a lot of goofy things, but when they do this, this breaks lore, this breaks logic. It has some very dark implications and kind of does its job at trying to confuse people. Now, I know that in our current culture, this is considered highly encouraged. Thus, we have a lot of members out in our world right now that are in confusion. Now, we're not really going to dive into that because we are on YouTube, but it is something where I can't look at this without seeing that they are adding to the confusion. And then Jared Thorne mentions, says to me that you don't have to be able to procreate to be in love. Well, that is indeed the reason why this is so goofy, precisely. Because, yeah, these two characters, they're not going to be able to procreate. And if they do, they're going to be an abomination hybrid, probably brought about by some sort of dark science. So, because, creatures can't actually mate, which is the big thing with this, is that, sure, in cinema it may seem logical, but in reality, it's not. So, they have a very heartfelt touching of tentacles upon the face. Well, that was something I didn't really want to see. And then the Mandalorians come on to the ship and they take him away, and thus the actual story begins. It begins with Din and Bo-Katan arriving on this new planet, which we have never seen before. It is called Plaisir, I believe. Plaisir. And as they come here, they mention that the Mandalorians have been are now under new command, and they will only answer to Bo-Katan if she has the Darksaber. Ominous foreboding. Well, they see the fleet off in the distance, the fleet of ships like Bo-Katan has, as well as an Imperial ship. And so they arrive at this giant dome city, which is honestly fairly creative. I mean, it's like a giant greenhouse, so I thought that it was going to be a different culture on the inside, and it turns out to be something very different. By the way, take a look at the buildings right here from this angle. It might be a little hard to see, but they're spherical. That actually comes into play later on, because when you actually get onto the ground inside that place, that spherical look is gone. And all the buildings on the inside that you can see like the faint outlines of right here, you see like a sphere, all that gone once they get into that city. This was the part in the trailer people assumed was a flashback to Mandalore because of the domed city. I did not know about that. So they arrive.
Yeah, it was very similar to Mandalore.
And they're caught in a tractor beam. Well, correction, they're caught in something that reprograms their ship, and it lands them right here. They come out and see Dark C-3PO and R2-D2. Boy, that's a bit unique. So they leave the ship, and they enter into a hyperloop. Now, for those who are familiar with this big push in the world to try and create hyperloops, you know that it is a fantasy, because it is yet to be created, and right now it's this idea of that, hey, we can make hyperloops and all the problems of the world will be solved. Literally, that's like how the engineers pitch it. Have a hyperloop and you solve the energy crisis, you solve carbon emissions, you solve all these wonderful things, and it makes it super fast, and there's nothing that you lose. Well, in reality, hyperloops are incredibly difficult, but this is fantasy, so stretch of the imagination. But as they were getting into this, I kept thinking, aren't these folks in Star Wars? Shouldn't they be, I don't know, going around on speeders? Why do they have a hyperloop? The air's not toxic. They don't need to be like sealed off. What's the whole big deal with having a hyperloop? And then once they got in, it made a lot of sense. They were doing a Disney promotion. Not just any Disney promotion. They were promoting the Disney Magic Band. They literally have to show who they are before the ride will commence. This is designed to promote Disneyland. And unfortunately, I feel like this is going to start to appear in at Galaxy's Edge. Probably sooner rather than later. All this made Jared think of Epcot, which is true.
And they only like confirm, like people's suspicions are like they want to get rid of our cars. They they want to control our transport, where we go, when we can go, and stuff. Like this whole thing of like that, like if that was put into our world, like this whole like you have to like have a wristband that identifies you just so you can travel from one place to another. Like I don't know, it's just like kind of like confirming people's like suspicions. Do this fantasy show, but you know what I mean.
This is
really
a utopia of dystopia, and you all will see this the further we dive into this.
Yeah.
So Bo-Katan and Din have to both show their chain code, which now correct me, Rolling Chairs and Jared, but wasn't the chain code something that was specifically Mandalorian? Because Boba did it last year, and I thought when it appeared, it was in Mandalorian chain script, which suggested that it was designed by the Mandalorians for Mandalorians. So, but the thing is that
some form of like ID that we have.
Yeah, but the thing is that the Mandalorian script wouldn't have been used for that, and that's what's so odd about all this, because they did use it for Boba Fett. And it made sense because you thought, oh, this is like a remnant of their culture. Now it's like, oh no, this is your form of ID.
Yeah.
So they get a chance to show off their fancy little chain script IDs, their chain code IDs, and then they're allowed to ride the ride. It catapults them off and they travel into the city, and they realize that they can't go anywhere else other than where this tram is going to take them. They exit and they find another gathering of rich characters, which Disney seems to really like to do in a lot of their shows. They have the rich elites, but unlike the rich elites of other Star Wars worlds, this one is a utopia. They enter in and everybody's in festive gear. It's like they're having a party. Yeah, coming to a Galaxy's Edge near you. You can come and join the party now, and we don't question who you are. You got armor, you got weapons, and we are a civilization that doesn't have any weapons, so just come on in. Everyone's love, everyone's kindness, and we're drinking out of this tank above us that has a giant creature swimming around inside of it, and you have these little hoses that come out of it. It's just swimming in it. It comes out of it and it goes into their drinks. This whole area is really strange. Colors are all over the place. The culture is all over the place. The logic is nowhere to be seen. And we get our first introduction to these two characters, which I was not a fan of, but at the same time, I understand, well, it wouldn't have been bad if this whole planet didn't break the Star Wars universe so much. It's because they were basically another part of a very broken storyline that I took issue with this. But bad acting I've come to expect in the show. So I wasn't put off by the acting. I wasn't put off by the characters. I was put off by what this planet represented. Because as they're describing...
That's bad acting.
Yeah. Not
She
necessarily.
cannot act at all. Jack Black did what he could with the script. You know, he had some moments where I was kind of chuckling a bit. But Lizzo, I was just like, oh my gosh, she really cannot act.
When you're acting, many times it's how you're being directed. So I don't necessarily blame the
Mm-hmm.
actress for this. I very much blame the director. But right here in this scene, you can kind of get a very good idea of where this planet stands. Notice the stormtrooper armor in the background. It's kind of a peculiar thing. This is a world that was ruled by the Empire, and then it is trying to be an independent planet, just like the previous planet. So this group is now being ruled by a former Imperial officer, but love conquered all, and now the queen of this realm has now a new king, and they're both elected officials in a utopia world that doesn't have any sort of weapons. It has no manual labor. It is a place of feasting and festivities and activities. Basically, Disney World. Again, it's like this whole
Well,
episode was designed to be a promotion for Go to Galaxy's Edge. And even things like this, I don't even think people were probably paying attention to that, but it is still part of this push to try and get people to want to go on vacations and have themselves catered to by everything.
yeah, and they say that they wouldn't be able to survive like without these droids and stuff. Uh, but is there not at least one person on this planet who's like, yeah, I'm not really interested in art. I'm not really interested in, just going to the park every day. I just kind of want to build stuff and sell it. Like, you think there would still be some people on this planet who are doing like some form of labor just because that's what they enjoy doing, but they don't think anyone can enjoy their work. Uh, and there are many people in Hollywood, but and
Yep.
like and like with the guns and stuff, like they're like, yeah, we have this perfect utopia where we don't have guns. We're safe here, but we literally have to hire other people to protect us because we can't protect ourselves. So we're completely dependent on another group of people to protect ourselves. Like the whole thing, like they're kind of. You're right. It's a dystopia of utopia, or however you worded it. Like
It's a
it's a
utopia, but
seemingly like
to us it would be a dystopia in many ways. So it's their
yeah, but
version of
it
what
almost seems
utopia
like
would be like.
yeah, but it almost at times I feel like they're mocking that idea. Like they're like, this is the world you want, but look at all the downfalls of it. Like this is like some of the negatives of it. Like what the hyperloop thing, like the fact that they can't defend themselves, the fact that like it's a direct democracy, but somehow this royal family is still in charge instead of some average person on this planet who's just like everyone else down below this little, you know, palace party thing. Like it's just like I don't know. The whole thing is like it was almost like it was mocking their idea. Like this is not the thing. Like the thing you want is not gonna be what you expect it to be. Type of thing. I don't know. The guns line was what they really got me. They're like, we don't have guns here, so we have to hire people to defend us. It's like, yeah, is that really
Yeah.
much better? Like, come on.
Yeah. Cajun Corey comes by and is agreeing that, yeah, this clips of the scene he saw, and it was indeed cringeworthy.
Yeah.
Jared mentions that Empire did chain codes to track citizens, showing them showed that in Bad Batch. Interesting. So again, not something I'm familiar with, but that's because that goes into the TV series, which I have not spent any time studying. He was just torn. He is just toned down Jack Black. Yeah, he very much was very much playing into his kind of standard persona of Jack Black. More messaging.
With what
Pure
he's given, though,
democracy
I think he nailed it.
is a utopia. Let AI do all the small tasks so we can just bask in luxury. That's kind of the story that's kind of at hand here. And because they're trying to add drama, it starts to take a different turn. It's trying to bring in drama, but we'll get into why this whole thing is ridiculous at the very end. Because we then are presented a very strange scene. We have to have the Mandalorians going off on their own, and we don't really want to have Baby Yoda with us. So what do? Let's give Baby Yoda to the Queen, because the Queen seems like such a nice character, and obviously, Din is going to be willing to just let little Grogu go because he trusts everybody. So what does she do? She's going to tempt him with a little fish, or what I can tell. So
treat him like a pet.
Yeah, a little
treat for you, here, boy.
Yeah, that's what he wants to see the characters do. Hold little baby Grogu. And unfortunately, that also means that little Grogu, who just used a Jedi move in order to get over there. Why? Because it's easier than have the character walk, because it's a little puppet that is kind of hard to maneuver around. So he flips, ends up in her lap, and is just happy. Because in the end, he's forgetting all his Jedi training. He's forgetting all his Mandalorian training. He is nothing more than baby Grogu once again. He doesn't speak. He doesn't do anything other than look out for his own well-being and want to be cuddled.
I will say, through all like the negatives of like Jack Black and Lizzo, like the dialogue they're given, I'm not like completely against their relationship. I kind of like some of the way like that. I don't know, like the way they talked about plans and stuff, like there are just things going on their planet, blah blah blah. And I kind of like their relationship a little bit. And like she's like, yeah, he's the love of my life. Like it's not like some terrible thing where like she's just like bossing him around or he's like holding her captive type thing. Like I do like that. It's like they're like, yeah, these people love each other. Like it's like not like the worst relationship ever, which I feel like is surprising from Disney. Like you think they'd take a very dark turn with something like that?
Is a lot better way of doing it than the opening scene with the calamari and the Quarren. This makes sense.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I was so disgusted by that first scene that I look at this and I was like, oh, this is much more welcoming.
Mm-hmm. But I do think it's going to get turned on its back. I think, we know Mandalorian captured Moff Gideon, so I'm pretty sure Bombardier, Jack Black's character, sent those Mandalorian to go capture Moff Gideon because he still sympathizes with the Empire. And I feel like he's pretty much backstabbing her in a way, like taking advantage of her love or something. That's what I'm kind of getting an idea from the little we've seen so far. But I don't know. I do like that. I do like their relationship so far. I'm not gonna lie.
So they take him away from the table, and they're going to talk some serious. Talk to them in a serious manner, because why? This plan is too soft and we need to go off to the side and talk about the reason why we want to hire you, because in the end they have a droid problem. And Din, who hates droids, despite what we've kind of said at the start of the season, where he was trying to he was supposed to show that he has overcome his anger and hatred of droids, it's all gone. It's all gone once again. They turn it on, turn it off the moment that is convenient for the script. They turn it off again for this because he is moving on from it, because they need him to be angry again. And let me see, there's something strange. They're just saying there's.
Yeah, and granted,
look at this right here. You can see the fake skin line right here. Can you see out on the character? It's where a fake skin starts. And so it's a kind of a strange thing. I mean, if it was supposed to be an attire, then I'm surprised they didn't just like color it slightly differently, but they made it skin tone because they want it to kind of like blend in, but there's a very obvious line there. So makeup team forgot to deal with that. So they would say, hey, we need you because we don't have any weapons and we don't know how to deal with droids appropriately because they do everything around here. We need you to look into this and help us out. But you got a bunch of Mandalorians that are just outside that can come in and help you. They're probably much better at this. I mean, it's an entire army out there. But based upon our democracy, we are not allowed to have an army enter into here. You guys have pretty complex democracy here. It very much feels it very much feels like it's a fake democracy, and I think that's the big thing about this story is that this is made to be a utopia that's a bit somewhere between a democracy and communism, but yet they're pretending like it's a democracy. It's like they're twisting the word around. So they accept, and they decide that they're going to go down to figure out what is going on with all of this, with all these droid shenanigans. They see some footage of these droids kind of going crazy, and it gets more brutal as time goes on until the point where it's a character with the cooking robot who is actually wielding knives. And by the way, before we do that, here's that character. So then they cut away from it. Why? Because we're to assume that it killed all those people there. We assume that's probably what's happened because they say, can't you just... Bo-Katan's like freaking out a little bit. By the way, before we continue, great Scott, we now know what happened to Doc Brown. He was so busy going to and fro throughout time, he probably set the DeLorean back in time to a time long, long ago and suddenly ended up in the Star Wars universe. And that's where it dumped him off and that he's been living here ever since. So now we have the answer why Back to the Future 4 never actually happened. It was good to see his character. I will say that. I kept thinking, who is that? Because I haven't seen him for a while. And when I finally realized that was Doc Brown from Back to the Future, Christopher Lloyd, it suddenly made so much more sense. So I appreciate his cameo in this. So they hear from this character that they do not have the means to necessarily shut down the droids because the droids do all their work. And if they did that, the whole planet would basically fall into poverty and chaos and whatever else would probably transpire from that point. But there's a giant red button that you can see right here, a red button that would shut down all the droids. I'm surprised didn't just reach over and press it right then and there. I kept thinking he was probably going to do something like that. Is what I probably would have done. Yeah. But anyway, so they're like, okay, me and AIs, I don't like them anyway, so I would have been ready to press the button. But there's a sinister part about that button that we learn about later on. So, by the way, one of the things that they mention when they're looking at all this, they say all of our security cameras. In Star Wars, they're called security holograms. Why? Because they are scans of an area so you can actually rotate around it in a 360 degrees so that you can see every angle. These are not security cameras. It's like calling a lightsaber a laser sword. They don't understand like the symbolism behind the name. And they're just writing basically by formula. They're not spending time to actually research the stuff and know why things were set up the way that they were. Jared Thorne says, it would have made more sense to just go examine the droids that have gone crazy. No, we had to figure out what droids would go crazy next. Yeah, they didn't really start with like pulling up the old droids. They have to go and wait for a new one to happen. So they are told to go and speak with the mechanics of the place, and so they leave to go meet with this species, which I cannot remember the name of this alien species. But this is the same creature that we saw in the first Mandalorian, the one that reprogrammed the assassin droid, which kind of makes sense suddenly why the assassin droid was reprogrammable. Because this species is actually really good with being able to reprogram droids. the best mechanics apparently in the galaxy. That would have been helpful to know back in Mandalorian Season 1. Again, kind of going back to what I mentioned a while back, is that Disney has a bad track record of introducing a plot line and not actually following through with it until much, much later. So, nothing new here, folks. It's just the same old story. But they go here and they get the famous line. They're called Ugnuts. That's right. They give the famous line, "I have spoken," and suddenly it makes more sense about the characters' behaviors, and so Din is able to communicate with them very easily, while Bo-Katan is very aggressive and doesn't get anywhere with them. They say that they believe that there is going to be another droid incident at the docking bay. Well, how do they know this? We don't know. Somehow they have like a sixth sense about this sort of stuff. So they leave and they go forth to try and find where these droids are and try and figure out which droid is going to lose its mind. So they go down here and they find all these reprogrammed battle droids from the Clone Wars, which, by the way, made a lot of sense. I like that angle for this story. It made a lot of sense. Obviously, you have all these machines that you would have had kind of isolated worlds wanting to turn to as a source of manual labor. Now, granted, you would have to deal with the programming issues, which we know from the B1 battle droids, where they started to lose their mind as the Clone Wars went on. They were losing their mind because their programming updates were scrambling them, which was introduced this whole idea that you can't just reprogram a droid from whenever you want. You have consequences for it. So we're presented with this idea that right now this planet is dealing with the consequences. A very good approach. So Din decides he's going to start taunting these droids. He's kicking them, he's pushing them around, and then suddenly one of them gets up and pushes him back. And so then it runs off, and they start a chase through the city, which, again, remember all those circular structures? Well, those circular structures are now designed to look like they belong in the world of Tron, or maybe on Coruscant, because all those circular buildings are gone.
Hard.
Oh, yeah.
Din got punched hard. He would be concussed. Like, he would be out of it. There's no way he just bodied that punch like it was nothing. That was metal on metal, like harder than any football hit type of thing. I don't get
Absolutely. Well, Obi-Wan, when he gets kicked by General Grievous, sure, he's not wearing armor, but you see like actual pain on him because he realizes this machine that he's fighting is so very powerful. So Din and Bo-Katan chase this creature, and Din says something crazy. He says, "Keep chasing him," and he darts off into an alleyway. And then he comes out of a window and knocks the droid over, and then they shoot it, and then out come all these droids saying, "Crime scene," and kind of section off the area. The whole time I was thinking, how did Din know that there's a shortcut?
Yeah.
If there's a locked door, he would have been, way behind. They have jetpacks. They could have caught up with this character. They didn't need to have a shortcut. But why? Because we're writing by formula, and when we need a character to catch up with somebody, we always have them take a shortcut.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in the way that robot was running, it looked so weird. Like, in the Clone Wars, you see that droid so many times, and you've never seen that droid acting like that. In my mind, I always viewed it as like the slower tank kind of droid. Like, it can take some more damage, but it's a little slower kind of thing. But that thing, it was running like an NFL player, like hurdling stuff, throwing stuff like Hulk. It was so weird to see the droid acting like that. Maybe it's because it was reprogrammed or whatever, but even so, like, I didn't think I was capable with the way it was built. But the way Din came out of that window, I thought it looked so cool. But even so, Bo-Katan had to get the last laugh and the one who finally, finished it or whatever. But the way he came out of the window, even though it's kind of unrealistic, it did look cool. I'm not gonna lie.
Jared mentions the Dark Trooper pounded his head into the bulkhead with no effect. That's true. The Mandalorian steel is very strong, but still the concussion. I would have expected, if nothing else, he should be have ringing from it because it was metal on metal. I kind of wish there would have been some sort of consequence, but there was none.
And maybe he was like dizzy falling up, like you just show him for like 2 seconds at least, just wobbling a little bit, getting his head rocked. You don't have to carry it on for the whole episode or the next episode or anything, but at least just show 5 seconds of him just like, whoa, that was a stunner.
Yeah.
My head is ringing.
Jared Thorne mentions the battle droids did run like that in the Battlefront game. They also ran like that in the Clone Wars movie, episode 2. They ran like that when they're on the Battle of Geonosis. And so it is definitely not something we are familiar with from the animated series, but that's because running animations are actually a bit complex. And so it's kind of difficult to kind of pull off, especially when you're working with the limitations of a very fastly produced series. That's a thing in shows and video games, says Keaton Corey, where somehow they know a shortcut to catch up, a plot convenience. I would have liked it if his visor pulled up a quick little shortcut and he realizes he can go around. And that's the reason why he has the benefit. He was wearing a helmet, Bo-Katan's not. And so he knows where the shortcut is and she doesn't. That would have been nice. So they are now looking at this character, this droid, and thinking, how is it that this happened? They found a little chip on him. And so they go off to find what was kind of floating around social media the other day. They go to a droid bar. Why? Because droids, they're people too. We already have aliens loving aliens. We have utopias where aliens and people are living together. And now we have a droid bar. Because why? This is utopia and everybody deserves to basically live their dream life. This is a very...
Does that mean they were...
Sorry?
Does it mean they were programmed to do that? Because literally earlier in the show, like when he's talking to the other Ugnaught, or earlier in the first season when he's talking to that first Ugnaught, he's like, droids are do what they're programmed to do. They're not evil in themselves. It's what the person behind it who created them did with it. So did just some alcoholic just force his alcoholism on these droids or something? And he was like, yeah, I'm going to send them all to a bar. I don't know. The whole thing is just why? Yeah, I don't know.
So we do get a little bit of a hint as to why that is the case when they're talking with this bartender, because back in Star Wars Episode 4, we knew that droids wanted to have oil baths, or they would get oil. Why? Because they needed it to really kind of keep going. Their gears would grind, so they'd say this is going to feel so good. But the thing is that literally they would be in pain because their systems would be saying you're wearing down your gears. You need to get more oil. That's why it mattered. But now it's being treated as if it's a social activity. And kind of like what you said, these guys were programmed to basically be people. But there is one plot point that actually does make sense, but it's done in a very messed up way. They're told that basically these droids are getting program updates when they come here. In their drinks, there is program updates.
Yeah, it's weird.
A droid drinking oil to get an update to their system, like a program update to their system. That's really weird. But they had to do it. Why? Because they want to try and show droids are people too. And of course, I being the anti-AI fellow that you all have been listening to for some time, I cringed at that because this is them trying to humanize robots. Which, by the way, the world has been trying to do for the last couple of decades. I am so tired of it. I want them to treat robots as robots. I want them to treat it the way that Obi-Wan Kenobi talked about in episode 2. If droids can think, there wouldn't be any of us now, would there? Because it's this understanding that George Lucas knew that droids would not bring about a utopia. They would bring about destruction. It happened in the Clone Wars. That's why the galaxy became so anti-droid. That's why they mocked it. That's why some people tortured them, is because they knew that droid. 3 testing. It looks like everything is coming back online right now. Be sure to tell me if you cannot hear. Right now, we're still trying to get everything restarted. Whole system crashed. Is that a coincidence? I think not. I hate AI. I have spoken. Precisely. All right, so almost there. Thank you, everyone who has actually still stayed with it. This is very much an odd occurrence, but it's also becoming far too common these last couple of weeks. It only happens during certain times. So I think we are good to go. Checking data rate. Looks like it's good to go. Testing sound. Okay, sound seems to be correct. It does sound a little different, so something's odd. Okay. Welcome back, folks. Our apologies. It's like every time I start going down this path of AI, something on my system glitches out. Somebody is listening on this. I am getting pretty convinced. It's probably my computer. It hates me. So, tis unfortunate. What was I saying just earlier? It was as Obi-Wan Kenobi was saying, if droids could think, there wouldn't be any of us now, would there? I think that the droids might be coming for me. So, all right. So we've officially reset. We're back up and running. So this bar, we get to see that there's these chips that they get when they've been to the bar, and those chips don't actually do anything necessarily, but there is a fluid that gets put into them that reprograms them. And this stuff, which isn't being programmed like with a port or anything like that, or not being updated like via some sort of antenna. No, what's actually happening is they're experiencing this strange little bacteria thing. And so anyway, this whole scene was put in there just to have us want to get behind the idea that AIs have intelligence and should be allowed to survive, basically. We are going to replace humanity. We live longer than them, and we just want to show our love and care to them while they are living, which is what the droid says. That's why this is very much a political statement that they put in there, which is unfortunate. So they leave, and Din still hates robots. They go to find out more about how these chips work. They go and they pull the droid out that they shot out of a... this is such an odd scene. Stand by just a second. There we go. Rolling Chairs should be now someone you can hear now. So Rolling Chairs was just mentioning about how on Coruscant they had an oil bath. It was very streamlined that Anakin sends his droids to go to.
Yeah.
And it was just mentioning that happened in the Clone Wars series. So to see that bar just made no sense.
Yeah, he sent him down to get fruit and go get an oil bath. But the oil bath, it was like a spa place, but it was very streamlined like a machine, which is when you compare it to this, it's literally machines acting like humans at a bar. It was really weird. It was like very weird.
Then we come here and we come to a morgue for robots. Not a scrap pile, a morgue. Very strange. So they pull out oil from this robot so they can analyze it. And while they're doing it, the droid that pulled out the oil freaks out and goes on a desired killing rampage using lasers. By the way, lasers should have actually taken them out based upon where it went with its first pass, but conveniently they're unscathed. They destroy it with Din with the Darksaber, just cuts it in half. They open up the vial and they look at the particles, and they find that there are these nano particles. Stand by just saying all my notes are gone.
I guess that's gonna be the last time we see Din use the Darksaber.
Hey, we'll get to that in just a moment. So Din uses the Darksaber. He cut the credit, but now we have this right here. These things right here are look like bacteria. They kind of function like bacteria, but what they are is they're pieces of metal. That does not look like metal. And what's more, they have inscribed onto them chain code. And they can actually see where these things came from. So, yeah, the Darksaber, he couldn't control it. So they see chain code on there, and it comes back as saying, oh yeah, this has this stuff is illegal. You shouldn't be able to use this. And I'm thinking the whole time, someone actually bothered to stamp information onto nanoparticles in a fluid on every one of these things and then ship them. And that has all your shipping information on it. What? It's so very strange that they have it on a nanoparticle. Do people in Hollywood not know how tiny these things are? That's impossible. Even for a sci-fi world like Star Wars, everything is big, industrial, and stamped, basically. You're not going to have nanoparticles. So anyway, they have these nanoparticles to program, and they find out that it's the person who's guilty is none other than Christopher Lloyd, Doc Brown. Great Scott. So this guy is the guilty one. Now they have their silver bullet, so to speak. It's time for them to go and confront this fella. So they leave, and they confront him. And then he gives actually a very good speech, by the way. I do like this character. I think this character had a lot of potential. I think it was not properly utilized, because we find out that this guy was a separatist, and he has talked about how he survived the Clone Wars, he's survived the Republic and the Rebellion, the Empire, and he's not about to give up. And he's in the red button that he had next to him from earlier, that actually activates all the droids to become back to their original battle droid state. That is actually a fairly clever plotline. I did enjoy that.
You would think he would just press it instantly, or when he gets caught in the act, you'd think his first action would be, boom, press the button, and then now they're having to deal with the problem across the whole, city or whatever, rather than just some old man in a thing, and it could help for his like escape or something. But his whole speech he did about, I really liked his speech about Count Dooku. Just I don't know, he was. I really liked that, seeing that kind of side of things. Yeah, he was like, Count Dooku was gonna be our savior, and then the Jedi enforcers, who pretty much became the police for the Republic and like generals and stuff. I don't know. It was really interesting to see that perspective.
I did like it a lot.
From him.
Unfortunately, he doesn't get a chance really to say anything more because then Bo-Katan
Yeah.
just stuns him, and then he falls down.
Yeah, that was a stupid part.
But before we forget about it, let's go back and see how the rich elites of Star Wars live. They play with roly-polies. They pick up a bug, and they throw it like a bowling ball. And then little baby Grogu helps the queen to win and stun the whole crowd. Very impressive. So they bring forth the person who is reprogramming all the droids, and they say, "Oh no, it's you. You were the one that was causing all these problems. How could you? We took you in." He's like, "Could I not get your forgiveness? Because down deep, I'm really a good, swell guy." And they say, "Of course, you can just go into exile on one of our moons, and then you can have your forgiveness." He's like, "Okay." And he turns around and he walks away. No one to watch over him, nothing.
The funny thing is, literally early in the episode, she's like, "Is there no room for forgiveness in a galaxy so vast?" For Captain Bombardier, this ex-Empire, who literally like said he worked with these robots or something, and but for someone who literally served her family for years, she's just like, "Yeah, get away from me." She doesn't even like maybe try and listen to him and like maybe why he did it, or I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They could have done so much more with it, but it was terrible. It was so bad. Yeah, it was very bad.
Jared Thorne mentions police droids had him surrounded. This guy was reprogramming droids. Somehow I think he might have had like maybe a vial of this stuff to be able to inject it into the droids.
And do you think they would handle this situation, like, because these robots were being used for like pretty much like terrorist attack type things, like, or that some like just to cause chaos, and they're just like, "Yeah, we're just gonna handle this situation," and literally assume this dude guilty in front of, like, on the sports field where we play games. Like, you think they would take this to a private area, like where they're literally gonna enact their law. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Maybe
really
even see like where their
they,
society is like crumbling, and then it kind of hints that there's more going on than just this paradise. But no, they had to maintain the paradise mentality that we have forgiveness, but there's going to be stiff punishment. Very goofy. So they give him the key to the city. Isn't that just nice? Here's the key to Palacier's Dome Paradise.
Where am I gonna keep that huge key, ma'am? Like, do you want me to keep that in my pocket? Like I don't know. That's what I'd be saying. I'm like, this key is too huge to carry around. Now I gotta carry this around for the rest of the episode. Come on.
Jared Thorne mentions a democracy with no trial. 'Tis true.
Yeah.
But not only that, because these characters have done such a great job, but the queen, she knows who really did the heavy lifting around there. It's little Grogu. So what are we going to do? Little Grogu, we're going to knight you as a knight of Palacier.
He is.
Aw, isn't that touching?
Grogu is so pointless this season. I mean, he had one scene where he was left with the armor, and you kind of saw a flashback. But you could have had that flashback with him with Luke. Like, that had no connection to him and Mando, or him and Din. Like, he is so pointless to the story they're building over here, at least for this season. It's just like, why is he even there? Like, and we know why. It's because people think he's cute, and they like seeing him travel around Din. And it sells money, so they want to have him on TV as much as possible. But it's just like he's adding nothing to this story in any episode this season. Like, absolutely nothing.
Oh, he's adding something, all right. He's adding lots of bills to old Disney's wallet. But that knighting scene,
merch.
yeah, that knighting scene, she uses an actual sword and she knights him so that little kids, when they go to Star Wars, they don't have to just be Jedi Knights. They don't have to be Mandalorians. They can also be Palliser Knights. And you too, little Timmy, can become a Palliser Knight. All you have to do is help out the queen with her pill bugs as she is trying to play a game. Doesn't that sound like a Disney like children's activity? That's exactly what they're doing.
They're gonna be like, purchase this thing, and then you can do all these things around Galaxy's Edge, and once you complete them, you please the queen, and you will be knighted. All you gotta do is spend some money and play this game first.
Yeah, precisely. Everything about Grogu is just to get money. And by the way, Grogu can jump up into the queen's arms, but Din has to pick him up. So they leave on the Hyperloop, and the Hyperloop takes them to the Mandalorians and their Imperial fleet. By the way, I've never seen this ship in the Imperial fleet before, and yet look how many there are. Bo-Katan has one, and every one of these guys have one as well. I would have expected like modified TIE fighters or something like that.
I think those are Mandalorian ships, if I'm being honest. I think those are Mandalorian ships that they are now putting on. I think the main big ship is the one that's X-Empire or whatever.
Well, yeah, because that's the one that they mentioned earlier was X-Empire, and that was misinterpreted as such. But I would have expected they would have had like a fleet that would have been like modified ships, not all of the same class. I'll tell you why they had all the same class, because they didn't have the money to make a whole bunch of other ships. So they get there and
trying to sell this shit.
By the way,
trying to sell those ships.
Oh yeah,
hard. We don't need to see the Naboo ship anymore.
All these Mandalorians as well, they're actually doing what Mandalorians should be doing. These guys actually act like they're training, like they're preparing, like they're just exercising. When we are on the planet with Din and his enclave, that did not feel natural, because they're all playing on this little spit of sand. This is an open field, and they're just guarding their gear, and they're waiting basically for their next mission. That makes sense. They got banners, they got gear about, and some of them are exercising, some are resting. It feels normal. Well, as Bo-Katan and Din approach, the leader says, well, I'm in charge. Bo-Katan, you're not in charge. You're not our leader. If anything, that fella right next to you who has the Darksaber, he should be the leader. Bo-Katan doesn't like this, and so Bo-Katan challenges him, and they have a fight. And not only does she beat him once, but she beats him a second time. They use their jetpacks, and they have actually a pretty decent action sequence. But in the end, it's like Bo-Katan is like impossible to defeat, and this guy got the floor wiped. She wiped the floor with him, because in the end, he's just that bad. By the way, they're using knives during this fight. Mandalorians have some pretty nice armor, and somehow they're using knives. That doesn't feel very effective.
He didn't think neither of them have their helmets on either. Like I understand that Bo, for some reason, isn't carrying hers around and not wearing it now that she's part of the new tribe. But with him, his helmet was literally right next to him, and he got challenged to a fight that could lead to your death. You think his first reaction would be like, all right, I'm going to protect my head. And you think he'd put his helmet on. I don't know. That's just me. That's what I do. But
right.
It's so stupid. I think she should have challenged. Once he called her out, I don't know. They could have built up to it a little differently, but I think what I honestly thought it was building up to is I thought she was going to challenge Din for the Darksaber at some point. And he was in, I felt like he'd be like, no, like I'm not fighting you. Like, you can just have it. And she would be like, no, I am going to fight you for the sword. The way our ancestors did, the way it's supposed to be. But he's just like, no, you can have it. You know, he fought some random spider robot on a planet on Mandalore. So now she can have it. It's just like, dude, this is the most anticlimactic thing that could have possibly happened for the transition of the Darksaber. So she should have challenged Din instead of this random dude for some reason. Like, it was so dumb.
Precisely. Well, what's more, when people are fighting, physical weight is a huge part of fighting. It's a very big part. And not only is it muscle, it is body mass. Bo-Katan is not someone who's strong. And the fact that she's kind of like acting as if she's big and tough, I know it's what Hollywood does. You know, you want to have your women like big and tough, and but in the end, it doesn't actually make any sense. And I wish that they would actually kind of approach it with the idea of that she's not as physically fit, and she doesn't have like the weight to be able to shove people around. I wish they would do that. But of course, Hollywood won't do that because that is not an ableist, which is unfortunate. Jared Thorne mentions, you have the Grogu action figure, but do you have Grogu with a Berserker shield? Sorry, with Beskar shield. Why did I think Berserker? My bad. So with a Beskar shield, precisely, they do want to have it to where you can buy it. That's why they changed the arm of C-3PO for one movie and made it red. Why? Because they wanted you to buy that one version. Not the replacement arm. They wanted you to buy the whole character. Because, you know, you just want to have that collector's item. No, I don't. If their job is to defend the planet, wouldn't they be flying patrol, not sitting around? That's a good point. That is a very good point. They did not really approach that in this story. Din hands over the Darksaber, and it's supposed to be this really touching moment of that. Now Bo-Katan, this little waif of a character who we've not really had too much real good attachment to during this series. Now she's supposed to be the great leader that we all have wanted to kind of take the mantle for some time. And the whole time I was thinking, I really don't want to see her becoming the leader of Mandalore. Din would have made a lot more sense because that would have challenged everyone's concept of what the Mandalorian order was. It would have unified them in a very strange way. None of them could have like gotten past like the bloodline sort of problems, and then here's this one guy who basically is not true Mandalorian, but who walked away, thus inspiring them to actually return to being Mandalorians. That would have been more compelling, but they didn't. And very sad.
And I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, and Jared, if you've seen it, you can correct me in the comments, but I'm pretty sure she's already wielded the Darksaber before. Like, she was like the owner of the sword, the ruler, and I'm pretty sure that was happened in Rebels, if I remember correctly, and she becomes like the ruler Mandalore, and then she lost the sword or something. I'm pretty sure that's where it picks up the Mandalorian. And she's like, "Yeah, I lost it or whatever," and you feel like she's like on this redemption arc or like a vengeance type arc where she's trying to get it back. You feel like some people would be like, "You had the sword, you lost it. Like, why should we want you to rule over us again?" type of thing. But everyone's just like, "Nope." She killed a spider plant. She killed a spider with it, so now she gets the sword, and there's just like no question or anything. I don't know, the whole thing. And like, if we're talking about the who should have the Darksaber, so frick. The whole so Darth Maul had it, and then Palpatine defeated Darth Maul, and then Darth Vader defeated Palpatine, and then Luke defeated Vader. So technically, Luke was the rightful person to have the Darksaber. So if we're really getting technical about who should have it, it's supposed to be Luke who has the Darksaber, not her because she defeated some spider on Mandalore. So if they're really trying to like stick up to the laws of this thing, they'd be like, well, Darth Maul had it, and he became ruler. He was ruler for 2 seasons of Mandalorian or Clone Wars, and then Palpatine came and defeated him, and then Vader defeated him, and then Luke defeated him. And Luke didn't defeat Vader. Vader died, so it'd get passed down to his descendants. So Luke should have this. Luke is the rightful Lord of Mandalore, if we're getting practical with it, technical.
This is why when you have TV series, many times It's like this one right here, the Mandalorian. Nothing here actually has weight behind it, because in the end, the writers for this sort of stuff, they don't care. They never cared. They're just trying to quick churn out an episode so you'll stay tuned for next week. They're not trying to tell you a compelling story that you're going to watch again and again. They want you just to come back for the next episode. When you write like that, it's really hard to get weight behind it. And we are seeing the consequences with it right now in how this story is not shaping up to being anything of merit. It's not giving us any sort of good conclusions. It's very frustrating as a whole. And it's unfortunate. So we end we end the episode there, and unfortunately, we are left with, well, we are left with a bit of improvement in the sense that we actually see the story moving forward, but we don't see the lore being approached any differently than the rest of the series. It's continually thrown out, even stuff that they have established in this series. They throw it out in favor of the here and the now, and it's so sad to see, because this story actually could be something really special, and I don't feel like they even care about that. It's like all they care about is their paycheck.
The show could be so much better. Like, there's so many little like seeds that have kind of been planted that they could have taken to a whole new level. Like the Darksaber alone, and the controversy and the tension that could have caused between Bo and Din could have been a whole season of storytelling in itself, like how they're dealing with that, and then her, she could have challenged him for the sword, and they could have been fighting to the death type of thing. But no, they don't want to kill off or risk killing off either of these characters or find a way to go down that path. But there's so many things they could have done differently that could have made this season honestly the best in the series. But they're just like they're taking the easy approach with it. It's a shame.
By the way, when Bo-Katan mentioned at the very start of the season, when she mentions about without the Darksaber, the everything fell apart. Why did they need a fleet? Who were they fighting against? Were they planning to invade the planet of Mandalore? They thought the place was poisoned. No one was willing to even venture there. So what was the whole point about there even being a leader of this band to begin with? Why did they need to have a leader of Mandalore when there is no Mandalore to fight for? They can't even figure that part out, which is unfortunate.
And why would they choose? And why would they choose Bo-Katan? You know, she's a part of Death Watch, which failed and led Darth Maul to overthrow Mandalore. She doesn't have the Darksaber. She lost the Darksaber. So if the people were truly critical of who should be their leader, you'd think they'd be a little more questioning of, is she really capable of leading us? You know, and that could have led to an interesting storyline where she has to prove herself again. Like, yeah, I lost some battles, but I can still rule. I can still lead these people. But they don't dive into any such thing.
By the way, none of this would have happened. Sorry, none of this story arc would have happened with the Darksaber if Din could have actually wielded it. He's the only one, as I understand, who couldn't wield the Darksaber. Only one. Which kind of suggests that Disney set it up because they wanted to humiliate him and make him have to step aside. Because that way they can bring Bo-Katan into being the prominent Mandalorian moving forward. They've passed the mantle on, so to speak. And I would dare say, in the future, Bo-Katan will probably, I'm theorizing, Bo-Katan will replace Din Djarin in future seasons.
Yeah.
Which is very frustrating to a lot of people, and to me, who looked at this and thought Din's character was being built up as if he was a nobody. And he was going to actually become a somebody. And now, nope, he is a nobody. In fact, even in his own show, he's going to start playing second fiddle to Bo-Katan. They're gender swapping their main characters. And they've done this in Disney for a great many films. and now they're doing it with this one. And so it was kind of inevitable. Once I heard that Bo-Katan was even going to be in it, I thought, oh, great, they're going to replace him. And now we're seeing that. He's handing over the Darksaber without a fight. He's obviously not skilled enough because he can't wield it, and anybody else can wield it, like, no problem. And, but don't worry, he's got a little Grogu. Oh, wait, Grogu will be easily taken away by anybody who just waves a little fish in his face. He's a knight in his own right, and Din Djarin, all he has been is the heretic because he took his helmet off. So,
well, the way I interpreted him having trouble wielding the Darksaber was that they, a huge complaint with the sequel trilogy is like, oh my gosh, Rey Skywalker was able to do everything without ever doing any training. Like she literally defeated Kylo Ren in the first movie, and she never even touched the lightsaber or any such thing. So I felt like they were trying to overcorrect with this and be like, look, it's not just something you can just pick up and do. Like you have to learn, you have to train, like something you have to perfect. And I thought they were building up to where we're eventually going to see him be like a master with the Darksaber almost, and we're gonna see his progression. But I feel like they really changed the storyline and the way they were going to take the story in this season. Anything I was expecting after the second season, it all changed in Book of Boba Fett and this season. And
yeah, the moment they brought in
not for the
Bo-Katan,
better.
that's when everything fell apart, I think. Because Bo-Katan's character is so contrary to the lore. It was inevitable. All this stuff was going to start causing problems. And I thought maybe the Mandalorian was trying to find like a way to tastefully blend it together, and it's not. It's not tastefully blending. It's just quickly trying to stitch all these elements together, which don't actually correspond to each other. And they're just saying, "Hey, look, both sides of the films, the books, the TV shows, the merch, all this stuff is interconnected, and this show is going to show you how it's interconnected." But at the same time, then it sacrifices story when it really shouldn't, and sacrifices lore when it shouldn't. They pick and choose so much because they do not have a clear roadmap. There are some big contradictions between all that stuff. You have to pick and choose. And I feel like they pick and choose, and then they go back and change things because they're uncertain of which path they actually want to take. So when you add too many different elements that have lore behind them into the same series, you're going to have this problem if your writers don't know how to do it right.
And I think this is a huge Filoni thing. The fact that Bo-Katan is taking over, because I'm pretty sure she's a Filoni character created through and through. Like, and so
almost everything
kind of
about the Mandalorians in that series came from Filoni.
Yeah. Yeah. And I honestly think Disney was like, we want to get back into the Mandalorians, but we're going to do something new. We're going to have, I think they wanted I think they wanted to have someone start out as a nobody, just doing bounties, going to some random small planet and saving some baby. And somehow this leads to him becoming the ruler of Mandalore, like climbing the ladder type thing. And I think once they gave Dave Filoni the rule over it, they're like, no, we're going to go back to the character I created. Like, we're going to shove this character to the side. And they're not handling that transition gracefully. There is a way that they could have had Bo-Katan, become the ruler of Mandalore again, but it's not even entertaining, or there's no substance to the story that they're doing. But yeah, like I said,
would have been
beginning of the
interesting.
show,
What would have really been interesting. Now I know that this would not have been popular, but honestly, I think it could have done really well. I would have had Din Djarin and Bo-Katan fall in love. I think that would have actually done something where it would have shown like the union of both orders and them forging a brand new order together. And then Grogu kind of being the merger between the Mandalorians and the Jedi. And suddenly you have a whole different dynamic moving forward. If you had done that, you would have made a lot of people angry. But you also would have done something really special that Star Wars really hasn't done effectively up until this point.
That would have been much better than what we got here. And even if they didn't want to take it that far, they could have just done this simple thing. It maybe didn't, instead of him just constantly being like, I don't want the sword. Kind of like Jon Snow in Game of Thrones. He's like, I don't want the throne. You're Khaleesi. You are the ruler. Like, if they just changed that a little bit, where it's like he could have just been like, yeah, I have the sword. I'm the ruler now, and maybe he's trying to start take action and truly change things. And Bo-Katan, they're like that one little line that they do at the first, where he's like, I don't want it. You can have it. Like he should have just been like, I'm the ruler now, and that one little bit could completely change the whole dynamic of the show in the future. Where and but the fact that he did that, it just led to this point where he's just willing. He's like, yeah, you have it. It's your show now. This is Bo-Katan and the Mandalorian. It's not the Mandalorian anymore. I don't know. It's such a shame. So this show too could have truly been. This could have been the season that truly took the show to a new level, but they didn't capitalize on it.
We skipped on this part last time because we were kind of running short on time, and we are running short on time. But I still want to actually dive into this a little bit. I want to actually take a quick analysis of how they could have improved the story. I would have skipped this first part entirely. It doesn't serve any real purpose other than maybe something happening in the future. But since I don't know about that, we're going to ignore that. I would have skipped this first part of the Mandalorians and the bounty. So we come in here and they're trying to find the Mandalorians, and they see this city. It's sealed off. Why? Because the culture here has already seen the war that happened with the Clone Wars, and they decided they were going to shield themselves off. And turns out that they specialize in tech and innovation. And so because of that, they are able to make sure that no one in the Empire and no one in the Republic were able to really grasp what was happening over here. They kind of scrambled all information about it. But there was one more lord who actually did find it. So they land down and they see the army off in the distance, but they're told that they need to first deal with the local government. The reason why is unsure to them, because all they've experienced is that they got caught in a tractor beam and they're at the mercy of whoever landed them at the secure hangar. They exit the secure hangar and they're escorted by droids into the palace. At which point they meet the rulers, and you find out that the rulers are these two characters, but the Imperial officer was the only one in the Empire who really knew that this place existed. He stumbled upon it, and ever since then, he has been protecting it, even back when it was under the Empire, because he ended up that he fell in love while he was here on the planet. While he's going to his story, Bo-Katan starts to say that this is ridiculous. How is it that you would be so willing to cast aside your orders? And he says, sometimes orders and values sometimes change when you suddenly realize that you want to be near someone that you care about, and thus planting a seed in her mind. Because they are caring, Grogu has an affinity for them, and so he very easily is comfortable around them, and Din actually finds them to be charming folks and remembers some folks that he met in the past and thought, okay, I can trust them while we are here. But he also because he knows about that Grogu has had Mandalorian training, and so thus he is far better than and is not going to just be easily taken captive anymore. They take him over and they tell them that they have a droid problem. This place that has been relying upon tech has become overly reliant, and thus the people have become very lax, and they're honestly a bit bloated, and they don't know how to deal with these dangers that are rising, and they don't know where it's coming from. And so they need someone who can actually deal with droids, and they say, well, why can't you just deal with it yourself? It's not that we don't have weapons. We have been so far removed from conflict, we don't even know the first thing about how to investigate and find a killer. We are completely inept at that. But you have an army out there. The last thing we want is to bring in an army that is going to cause our population to become afraid. We keep them outside and the people feel safe. The moment we bring them inside, then they're going to feel very suspicious about us. And during the next election, we might not still be here as rulers. Thus putting weight upon why it is that they want to hire kind of secretive investigators. And that's why they saw an advantage when they were landing. And Bo-Katan says, well, why can't you just pretend to do that with one of the Mandalorians outside? And then the ruler says, oh, well, come to mention it, I have very good dialogue with him. And he told us that when your chain code for your ship was registered, that we were to bring you over here. And Bo-Katan says, really? He wanted us to come and see you rather than him. And so Bo-Katan starts becoming suspicious about the Mandalorians outside. Maybe they're not the friends that she kind of was expecting to find. So they agreed to help out in order so they can actually see the Mandalorians. And so they go down and they see the security holograms. And while they're going through the holograms, the character who is in the center starts mentioning about how he is in his position because he's the only one who actually has an interest in doing his job to a good efficient level. Everybody else is becoming lax and lazy, and I'm here trying to make sure the whole entire system here stays afloat. Every droid answers to me, and so all these droids are malfunctioning. And so yes, this is indeed a problem. But let's not get too hasty on this. Why? Because he's actually a separatist. He's having to show them because he was told that he had to show them this. But he decides to instead give them a false lead. He says, well, maybe the first thing you should be doing is talking with some of the shipments that come in, because this is where the droids are going to. Shipments. Yes. These droids, they go out to the docks, and while they're at the docks, we don't really know how to monitor them properly. Why? Because he's trying to make sure that they don't find the actual source of where this stuff is coming from. They go off and they try to locate it, but as they're going to the docks, they come across the Ugnuts. And Din says, we should still ask these fellas if they know anything about it. And so they take an opportunity to ask them, and they say, we don't know. But rather than giving them a lead about where to go, they just basically prove that they are trustworthy, and they give us kind of the idea that these droids can only be programmed, and they're not going to act outside of that programming. And they reluctantly say, okay, yes, we understand that, we'll move on our way. So they go over to the docks. While at the docks, they're investigating one of the ships, trying to find if anybody is like putting any sort of bad circuits onto these robots. And while they're doing that, they are suddenly... Din gets this idea that he's going to try and taunt the droids, see if he can spark them to become aggressive. And eventually it actually works. He kicks one and it fights back, knocks him to the ground, and runs. And so Din chases after it. He uses his headset and he sees where the droid is going, and he uses it to get a shortcut in order to capture the droid. But as he's starting to capture it, Bo-Katan shoots it and obliterates its circuitry. And he says, why did you do that? She says, why? You hate droids. And he says, well, things have transpired and I'm not the same man as I once was. This is now harder for us to find the evidence of this. And Bo-Katan is actually remembering back to her past and how she has prejudices against the droids. And so then they decide, well, we need to take this chip that we found on there and try and find out if there's any sort of information we can get from a droid that might actually identify this, because the people are becoming very lazy. They don't necessarily know how to identify stuff like this. They're going to resort to going to a droid. So they go off to try and find droids. They find an oil spa, and the droids are there getting maintenance. It is a junky place, but for the most part, it's actually there's still a lot of junk around, but for the most part, it's actually better taken care of than other places where they have seen junkyards. The reason why, the Ugnuts have been taking care of the droids, and you see some Ugnuts off to the side maintenancing the droids. They start to look through the droids and they find some other chips that makes them think that there is probably a similarity with where this programming is coming from. Maybe it was something that is being implanted onto the droids, but not from the shipyards, but from somewhere inside the city. And so they show the chip, and the droid responds with, that chip doesn't have any sort of similarity to any of the chips we have around here. And which makes them think that maybe the chip was put on the wrong place, which is the whole reason why they could actually find it to begin with. And so Din decides to take a look back at the morgue, try and find some other droids that maybe would have this chip. And so they open up several of the droids that they have captured or destroyed in the process, and looking for where this chip might be located. And they can't seem to find it anywhere. They look on the battle droid that they pull out, and they realize it is the only one that was armored. Every other droid wasn't armored. And so they thought maybe if they open up the plate, they would find out where this circuit came from. While they're doing this, they put the chip onto the tray of the droid that is servicing them. But as they are starting to pull away the plates of the battle droid, the droid freaks out and suddenly starts to destroy the place. And in doing so, reveals that the chip had to be attached to a very important circuit that was connected at the base of, on the underside of one of the arms near a port that would actually have access to the circuitry of the device itself. And so then they start looking at other droids, and they see that all of them have it underneath the plating in this very secure location, which doesn't necessarily look like it should belong there, even that it should fit there. So thus they go off with information that this is being done inside of the city, and they get a hunch that maybe somebody who actually knows tech would know something about this. They go to confront the person who is in charge of all the droids, and they ask him if he knows anything about these chips. And he plays dumb. He says, no, I don't know anything about those chips. That's ridiculous. While Din is there, he looks over and he sees a droid that has been assisting him, and he sees that there's a chip underneath the armor in one of the circuits. He sees it just out of the corner, and he grabs the droid, rips off the plate, and blasts it, and holds up the chip and says, I think that these things are far more prevalent in the city than we realize. And as he's scouring the area, he's pulling out stuff from desks and whatnot, and he finds a little hatch with a small separatist emblem. And he opens it up, and he finds all these chips in there. And two and two get put together, and they realize that this guy is the one that's been putting him into there. At which point, he then reaches over and presses the button that is designed to activate all the battle droids. Just as he is zapped by Bo-Katan, he falls down, but the damage has been done. The city is starting to fall into chaos. People are starting to leave, and the Mandalorians, for the first time in the city's history, they call upon an external army to enter into the territory. The Mandalorians come in, and they do a very swift job at destroying all the droids. And as they're finishing up the cleanup, they go back and they find the nobility still living their life up in their palace, completely disconnected from the people. thus raising some questions about what sort of people these folks are. Were they caring about the people enough to actually get involved, or were they just looking out for their own necks? And we just leave it off at that. No one, that all they know is that now the elections that will come up in the next couple of years are suddenly up for grabs, and they don't know what will happen. Honestly, the couple that are there feel still very genuine, but they start to suspect that there's other members of the upper class that have been like helping this out. And so thus they have something that is going to be a plot point for a later episode. As they're leaving, they say, "Thank you very much for helping us to find out this danger. The people are going to have a hard time adjusting to living without droids." At which point Din says, "You have Ugnuts down in the down the lower levels of the city. Consult them. Give them what they need. They'll return you to your way of life." And thus they leave. And this fella is taken off to a prison. But as he is starting to leave, the nobility says, "Wait." And the former member of the imperial office, the former military officer, reaches out and says, "I was on a different side too, and I held much bitterness when my hopes and dreams fell apart. We are trying to reach beyond that. We want you to stay, and we will still want you to be a part of our society. We believe in forgiveness around here." And so the Mandalorian is like, "This form of justice doesn't make sense to me, but these people have their way of life. We'll have to leave them to it." And so they leave. And little Grogu is not knighted. They go out to visit the Mandalorians. And while they're out there, Bo-Katan challenges the leader. And in a very quick fight, she proves that she can best him because she knows a very problematic weakness for him. She knows that he is easily blinded by rage, and thus uses that rage to trick him into getting himself injured, and then she gets the upper hand and causes him to yield. But as he's looking up, he says, "Well, you do realize there's only one person here you should actually be challenging, is the one with the darksaber." And she looks back at Din, and Din offers her the darksaber and says, "You want it? It's yours. I don't have any claim to it." At which point, she's left torn, because it's not the Mandalorian way that she was raised to just accept a weapon. It's not the Mandalorian way for Din to offer it. And she starts getting taunted by those around, saying that this is not the way. They're not saying it in terms of saying this is the way sort of counter. They're just saying this is not the way because these are not the true Mandalorians. They have wandered off, and they don't know how to necessarily walk the way. And so to them, they're just saying it passively, but that haunts Din. And suddenly, Din takes the darksaber and he clips it to his belt. And Bo-Katan looks off and says, "Every time I think that Mandalore is restored, it's not. The reason why? She's not willing to challenge Din. The reason why is because she's come to actually respect him as a Mandalorian." And the other side of a Mandalorian, which people don't tend to think about, compassion for another Mandalorian. We end at that point, and we're left with this strange tension of who is going to get it. And thus we leave it for the next episode, in which they are going to have to try and figure out who is going to be the leader of Mandalore. But we're teased the idea that maybe there would actually be a union between the two of them. And that would help to resolve the conundrum of the dark saber, but also the difficulty of having multiple orders all separate and no one walking the way. Thus, we come to the end of the episode. So, that's my idea how I would go about fixing it. Now, you all probably have a very different idea of how to actually fix it, but that's just a way that, based upon the pacing and the story arcs that we're presented with this episode, that's how I would approach it. Roland Cheers, what are your thoughts on the matter?
I really liked many of the things you said. I would have done many things differently with Jack Black and Lizzo's character. They could have been much more interesting than they were. I would have gotten rid of the whole first bit with the calamari and the Corin. I think they're called Corin.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't really care about that storyline. I don't think I really care about it in the future if they expand on it. But the whole, I didn't hate Lizzo and Jack Black's character like most people do. I just hated the situations that they put them in. Like, Din and Bo-Katan come up to the palace, and the first thing they see is some party going on instead of being received to them, sitting on some throne or some room where they would host some meeting type thing with these new visitors. Because they literally are bringing these people here with the hopes that they will solve some terrorist attacks that they're having. Which, you think they would handle that matter, I guess, a little more seriously. I don't know. And then, so I would have handled their characters differently. The whole thing with the droids, the whole thing with the droid and stuff, you said many good things with that. It was just my huge thing with it is just like the way they went back on all of Din's storyline just to make this episode have a little more tension. I hate droids, But yeah, I agree with what you said with the droids. He's like, why would you do that? Like, we need this. Like, we should try to capture it or do something else before just obliterating it. And obviously, I should have said this earlier, but I would have never had Bo-Katan take her helmet off. And the huge thing that I would change with the episode is they eventually come up to the Mandalorians and they see her with her helmet on while they're all sitting there with their helmets off. And, they'll just be kind of taunting her. They're like, Bo-Katan, the one who lost the Darksaber, led Darth Maul to overthrow Mandalore. Like, listing off all these problems that she's, kind of caused for their people. And they're like, then they'll just say one random thing. Like, how do we even know that's you under that mask? Trying to get her to taunt her into taking off her mask, which she's just been accepted into the way almost of this new people she's been accepted into, and she still keeps her helmet on. And then she challenges him. In a way they could have gone around it and she could prove that's still her under that mask or something is earlier in season 2 when she's introduced with Axe, the dude who's the leader of them now. We could see them like sparring or something, and he does some move and she's knows how to counter it, and she's like, you gotta stop doing that move. Like I know how to counter it. Like, anytime you do that move, I will do this and it will just overpower you. And then they challenge each other. They get in a little argument, and he does that move, and then she does it, and then she says, you gotta stop doing that move. That could be his way of being like, okay, yeah, it's really you under the mask or something. And just something like that. But it still leads to the thing where he's like, but why am I the one you're challenging? He's the one with the Darksaber. If you want to rule and you want us to follow, he's the one you need to be fighting right now. And I agree with what you kind of said, where Din's just like, whatever. Take this sword. Like, I really don't care. Like, and she's just, and people are taunting her, and she's just like, Well, I'm just accepting the people he is. I don't want to fight him and potentially put him at risk of death just so I can do this. Like, I care more about the life of the few Mandalorians we have left rather than this sword. It could really be a conflict for her. And I'm really conflicted with what I would do with that part as well. Would she challenge him? Would she not? I kind of liked what you said, where maybe she doesn't challenge him. She resists the taunts she's getting and deals with the backlash that she's going to get from her people because she might seem too scared or not willing to live up to what they're supposed to do just so she can uh, not put him at risk, and it could lead to some form of relationship. But I would have done the whole end part differently. As I don't know, this whole episode, there's good seeds in many parts of the show. It's just they didn't really hit the mark on any of them, which has been kind of the through line of every episode this season. Like they could have done so much more with what we're given, but they just don't hit the mark. And yeah, the dark saber. They should have handled it much differently. She shouldn't have just accepted it from him. Either it, she challenges him for it, or she's like, I don't want to fight you, and I respect you and I care about you more than this sword. Like I'm not gonna fight you and put either of our lives at risk for it, and that could lead to some relationship. Or she does challenge him, and she could beat him, and then it just leads to him going into like some form of exile, like almost like the tribe kind of hates him. They're like, you had the dark saber in your hands. We were rising again, and now she's with those people over there, and she's the dark saber. And they could kind of resent him for it, and they could have just caused so many trickle effects, and it could have been done so differently. I'm really conflicted with what I would do at the end, but really anything other than what they did would have been better. I kind of just rambled with no through line,
No,
but
that's fine. That's fine. No, I caught on what you're referring to. Right now, the big part is that none of this actually feels like it has weight behind it. And because they didn't approach this in a way that would have actually instilled like consequences or weight behind it, it feels like cotton candy. No substance
yeah.
whatsoever. On that note, we're going to go into now the ranking for this. I've added a new category. We've added plot. I debated in the past adding this because this is very subjective. I think at this point it kind of needs to be added. We'll see why in just a few moments. Right now we're still going on a score of 0 to 1. That score system is going to change a little bit to make it a little bit more sense in the future, but right now I currently still have my spreadsheet for 0 to 1. For the first scene, and this is the first scene up of the Calamari and the Corrin relationship and the bounty hunter's first appearance. Characters.
I mean, I guess I am kind of conflicted because the only thing we really do learn from this is that these Mandalorian are doing these type of things, which, we finally understand that who broke Moff Gideon out of, uh, you know, when he was captured, they broke him out of like imprisonment type of thing when he was being transferred. And we know it's them. And that's going to come up probably in the last episode. We're going to be like, Moff Gideon is going to make this return. And it's going to be these Mandalorians who brought him back. And that's going to be like some civil war type thing between these Mandalorian tribes. So I did like we found that out about those Mandalorians. It could have been done a better way. I guess I'm going to do 0 because the whole thing with the aliens was really weird.
I give it a solid 0. I really
Yeah.
did not like this opening. I'm going to give the dialogue 0 too. It was abysmal.
Oh, yeah, it was terrible. the calamari was acting like a kid. She was acting like a 40-year-old. Yeah, the whole thing was weird.
Action gets default 0.5. Setting, I give it a 0 because while they did show the tank, it wasn't even remotely close to what it should have been for a Quarren or calamari. This is very much a standard
Well,
Star Wars ship where they just conveniently added in something just to add a little bit of that aquaticness to the ship, and it didn't fit well. It was not done
yeah.
tastefully. And by the way, I have the same problem with calamari ships in the sequel trilogy. I think they should have been done completely different. A 40-year-old and a kid, says Jared Thorne. That's the Disney way.
That's what it felt like. Like, it literally felt like he was acting like a child who ran off with some, like, older woman. And I don't know. It felt really weird. It did. Like, they did not act the same age one bit. But for my rating of the setting, I don't know if this would quite classify as a setting, I guess, but like that opening shot where we see that Empire ship, like I thought that was so cool. Like I really liked that shot of the ship like coming into camera. It felt like something out that you could see like if in a George Lucas Star Wars movie, which it wasn't that complex to do for them, but I thought it looked cool. And if that classifies as setting, I guess I'll do 0.5.
Oh, here's this is where that clip was from earlier. My lady, your goldfish. Oh, looks delicious. Nom 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 nom. It just looks so hot. Wait. So this is that opening shot that you're referring to, right?
Wait, hold on. Let me get 2 seconds. Yeah, but once the ship comes on, the Empire ship,
Oh, yeah. So that's
I really
later
like
on.
that. It's literally 2 seconds after this, right here. With that ship coming on, oh yeah, it's right after a little bit of Mon Calamari. With that ship coming on the screen, it looks so cool.
Mm-hmm. So what would you give the setting?
0.5, just because of that
0.5.
ship. If that classifies the setting.
Plot, I give 0.
That one bit. Yeah,
Romeo and Juliet did it better. And as well as later on the story, they did that better too.
Yeah, 0.
All right, so we have 0.15.
Very weak opening.
Next, we have when the Mandalorians arrive on the planet, up until they start their investigation. So just before the security. So when they arrive, up until their chat with the rulers of the planet. For characters, I'm going to give it a 0.5. I know that people were like cringing about this opening sequence, and I think there's a lot of things to cringe about, but I was more offended by the plot than anything else.
You said we're doing characters?
Character.
I mean, I'm gonna do 0. I mean, there's nothing really expanded upon, nothing really to dig your nails into. I'm gonna do 0.
I'm gonna give the dialogue. Actually, I'm gonna change. I'm gonna give the character 0. I'm gonna give the dialogue 0.5. That's what I want to give. No, wait. Golly, this is a tough one. It's like, honestly, this is where I would give it a 0.25, but I'm not doing that because that's.
What particular?
I'm gonna give it. Actually, no. I'm gonna give it a 0 because I already mentioned about how this whole scene needed to be a completely different structure to add weight to it. I know why they chose to do it, but I would not give it any sort of rating for that. Action
I'm
gets
kind of curious
0.5.
what particular part of that was making you conflicted for it.
So the reason why it makes me a little conflicted is because they actually do a little bit more world building than previous times. I don't like the world that they're on, but they actually did more time actually kind of building up the world in
Yeah.
a much more deep way than past times where they just show up and it's just the same old trite world. So that's what made me conflicted, but I'm still going to give it a 0 for that.
Okay.
Action gets a
Did I do my
0.5.
rating?
I thought so, for a character and dialogue.
For dialogue, I don't think I did for dialogue, but
Okay.
yeah, I'm doing 0.
All right. Setting. I give this one a solid 0 because it just felt like it was a giant Disney advertisement. And it didn't even feel like it belonged to Star Wars. It felt like it belonged in Epcot more than anything else.
I mean, it kind of reminded me of Mandalore, and I'm gonna do 0.5.
Okay.
Once they get into it, it does not have the vibe or anything of Mandalore, and it really starts to feel off for the setting. But when you view the setting from the outside, I was like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
kind of interested.
Plotline. I give this one a 0.
Yeah, 0.
This is a tough episode so far. It's getting hit pretty bad. Next, we have the meeting with Doc Brown, looking at the security footage, all the way up to the start of the sequence of the droid of the doc. It's a very short sequence, but I can't think of how to better separate this thing out. So basically, it is Doc Brown and the Ugnaughts.
Wait, the Ugnaughts, not the dock, the shipping dock?
No, Doc Brown to the Ugnaughts.
Okay.
We stop at the start of the shipping area. Characters, I'm going to give characters a 1.
I'm going to do 0.5.
0.5. Dialogue.
Are you going or am I going?
You will go for this one.
0.
0. All right, I'm going to give it actually a 0.5. The reason why is because even though I wasn't a fan of the dialogue, it still actually was accurate to the lore that they were building up. So it, for at least in this sequence, it worked out. Action gets 0.5 as a default. Setting, I'm going to give setting a I'm going to give it a 0.5. It was better than the other ones, but it was still fairly weak.
I mean, yeah, the shot with them in Doc Brown's lair or office area and the Ugnaughts area, it looked pretty good. So, I mean, I'll honestly do a 1 for setting in these 2 spots.
Okay. Plot. This is a tough one for me.
I'm gonna do 0. I mean, nothing too great, to be honest. Actually, I'll do 0.5 just because the button wasn't kind of introduced in that area. I wish they did something different with the button, but, yeah, I'll do 0.5.
Doc Brown and the Ugnaughts sounds like a band, says Bastion.
Well, yeah, what I was gonna say from my review and changes earlier, I think Doc Brown should have had some alliance with the Ugnaughts, being like, we're gonna topple this planet.
That would have been
Kind
interesting.
Yeah, they could have done so much different with Doc Brown's character, but yeah. let's continue, I guess.
So next we have the shipping containers and the droid chase, all the way up until up until they go to so the droid sequence from when they're at the shipping docks to when they're at the bar, and then up to the lab when they find out what is going on with the droid. So this is the droid arc. Droid portion of the arc. Characters.
0.
I'm going to give it what?
Yeah, 0. Just because of how they're doing Din with the droids, they're completely ruining any progression they made with the droids. I mean, even in Book of Boba Fett, you see him. Even in Book of Boba Fett, you see him kind of working with a droid to help build his Naboo ship. Like, you see progression in his relationship with droids, and they really threw it away with this episode, which is terrible.
Yep.
It could honestly justify 0 for every scene that has any relation with Din and a droid. Mm-hmm. But
which is exactly the same argument I was given a while back with when it was him getting R4 is like everything. Well, him getting the assassin droid is like everything that. It's like his character flip flops all the time. It's very frustrating. Dialogue, I'm going to give it a 0.5 actually, because we still get progression with the dialogue. I don't really like with the characters surrounding it, but I will give it a 0.5 for that.
Are we doing the whole bar scene, like where he's doing the?
Yes, the whole bar scene. Everything, even up
like
until
the chips and stuff in the back room.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do 0.5 as well.
Action.
I was very disappointed with the action. I mean, I did not like the whole droid running around scene. The only thing that saved it was Din jumping through a window. That was for some reason, I don't know why, and I can't even explain why, but that looked so cool to me. See him jump through a window and tackling a robot.
To me, it felt very kitsch because people do it so often in the movies. But the thing that stood out to me was when he was hitting the droids. That actually stood out to me, and I actually count that as part of the action. So I'm going to give it a 0.5 because I think that there was merit. They were treating droids like they were droids for a time, and it showed the difference between how they were approaching dealing with droids versus a person. And so I will give it a 0.5 for the sequence. But I still think he should have been injured
the way
from
he
the
interacted
whole
with the
ordeal.
Yeah, the way he interacted with the droids was pretty interesting. Like, he was just like waving his hand in front of them, like seeing if there was some sort of reaction, because obviously he doesn't trust them again with the way they're doing the story. But I mean, yeah, I guess I'll do 0.5. That bit you were talking about was pretty good. Him just kind of pushing them, seeing how they would react, and
setting.
I mean, I like the window.
Setting. I give it a 0 because I did not like that bar scene, and the other areas surrounding it was not strong enough to really give it a 0.5. The dock was nice. It's not enough to get it to a 0.5.
Yeah, I would do 0 as well. The bar scene could have been much better. Like I said, if it was like a factory almost, like they were like it literally felt like they were humans with metal for skin or something. If they did it like it was almost like they were going to some factory just to get oiled up, it could have been much better. But it literally felt like they were going to some bar to listen to music or something. Like, all they needed was playing in the background. It would have been the full bar vibes. Or some music in the background.
Plot line.
I mean, 0. I mean, Din's relationship with the droids is all thrown away in this episode, so 0. The way he interacts with them, the way he hates them, he's like talking crap to this bartender droid. It's just like, dude.
Yeah.
You literally had help from a droid to build your ship. Come on.
I'm going to give it a 0 as well. recording that score. Then next we have confronting Doc Brown up until they get the key and little Grogu gets knighted.
Character.
So character, I this one I honestly am going to give a 0 because Doc Brown's character. Well, no, I'm going to give it a 0.5 because I like the speech that he gives, but everything else would have dragged it down to a 0 had it not been for that one speech.
Yeah, it's very, for me, it's very close to being a 1. I really liked that little speech of him talking about Count. When they said Count Dooku, like I stood up. I honestly was like, "Whoa, what is this saying?" Like I got interested very quickly. But he's the only character who really shines in that beginning and end to this part we're doing for the review. Every other character is just like meh. So yeah, he's the only reason it's at a 0.5. If we were just rating his character, it'd be a 1. To be honest.
Yeah.
So 0.5.
Dialogue, I also give it a 0.5 because of that. Everything else would have gotten it down to 0. So you're the same?
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
0.5 for me as well.
Action. I'm going to give it a 0 because I was disappointed that there wasn't action and there should have been.
Yeah, 0. The only action was the stupid taser. And that taser just interrupted a freaking awesome scene. It was 0.
Imagine what Lloyd could have done with a better writer, says Jared. He did a good job with trash. Yes, he did.
He did. Him and Jack Black did good with what they were given. Like a good actor can give a good performance in terrible directing and terrible script. They'll make the best of what they were given. But people like Lizzo, there were some stale moments with her because she's a musician. She's not an actress. So you can definitely tell the veteran-esque acting for those two characters, or two actors. Setting.
We are trying to wrap it up. We've been going on for a good long while. So setting.
I mean, with all my dislikes of the bar scene, it did look cool, honestly. So I guess I'll do 0.5.
I'm going to give it a 0. Plot, I'm also going to give it a 0 because it was a plot that didn't get realized. It was cut off short because of budget.
Yeah. I would do like a 0.25, but since we can't do that, I'll do a 0.
All right, recording that. And then lastly, it is the scene with the Mandalorians and the Darksaber.
Character 0.
Character is, 0. I'm going to give it a 0.5, but it's barely a 0.5. Dialogue, though, I'm going to give it a 0.
Yeah, I'm 0. It was stupid. Why does she even challenge him? The only time you challenge people is for the Darksaber. You don't just go up to random people and be like, I'm challenging you, warrior to warrior. It's like, why? Why are you challenging me? Like,
that's a good way to kill yourself.
What do we have to... We're not competing for the general or for the Darksaber. We're not competing for any gain. It's just to fight. It was so stupid. It was so dumb.
Action. I'm going to give it a 0.5 because some of the jetpack motions were decent. Everything else with the knife was garbage.
I'm actually going to do... I don't agree with why they did the fighting scene, but I did like the fighting scene itself. Like, she got kicked and she flew back. And then she got thrown off the wing of the ship and she threw her little string thing around him and pulled him off down with it. Like those two shots itself were pretty cool. So I'm gonna do 1 for the action, even though I don't like why the action was happening.
Right. Setting. I'm going to give it a 1. I like the scene. I just don't like the everything else that surrounded it.
I was the opposite. I didn't really like it. It honestly felt like the Mandalorian setting that we get on that desert planet type thing. Just felt like people were standing around, kind of. I don't know. It felt weird. I'm gonna do 0.
Okay. Plot.
0.
I also am going to give it a 0. That should not have been how they ended that episode.
Mm-hmm.
So we have right here we have a point. So right now we have my scoring has been closed down, so I'm pulling it back up again. We barely have a 3. It's like cutting edge between a 2 and a 3. If one of those scores had been 0.5, it would have actually probably put it down into the 2 category. That's how razor thin this is. So, a very strange episode as a whole, and honestly, not necessarily giving us much hope for a good conclusion to this story. It's kind of funny. They're all now going to go back to take Mandalore, which is empty because no one's living there. Because everyone thinks it's poisoned. You all should have been living there already.
With what we're given, do you have like some quick 30-second guess you can kind of guess where they're going? Because with me, I think Jack Black's character freed Moff Gideon. And I think Moff Gideon is going to make a return in the final episode. Do you kind of think that's where they're going with it, or do you think they're going to take it in a different direction?
I don't know about Moff Gideon and his character
arc.
He
was saved by Mandalorian.
We are led to believe that they're saved by Mandalorians. And based upon the Mandalorians we've seen today, that is very well could be the case. It could be these rogue ones that freed Moff Gideon. But at the same time, I think that Moff Gideon also could have been saved by any other number of sources. But I think Disney writers may have actually forgot about where that other characters can have Beskar. So I'm going to assume that they are indeed doing that they're either planting the evidence or they actually hired the Mandalorians and they just didn't know who it was they were hiring.
Okay.
I don't know which path they will take, but where I hope they go. That's a tough one because I know they're not going to go this route. Where I think they'll go is they're going to go back to Mandalore, and Moff Gideon's going to try and do some big hurrah against the Mandalorians. Why? Because he's bitter and he wants to take out vengeance. And that turns out this whole time he was plotting his vengeance, and that then Moff Gideon's going to have to experience Mandalorian justice, and then we get teased that he was working for someone else, and they're like, who was that? And then we travel to the other side of the galaxy, and we see Ahsoka raising her head, and it's like, I sense it, my time is now, or something like that. I kind of think that's what's going to happen. They're going to go back to Mandalore, have a very generic fight, and Moff Gideon's going to perish and have kind of I'm not the big bad guy. I actually was working for the big bad guy. And then it just ends like that. That's my theory.
I don't think we're going to see... I don't know if we'll see Ahsoka in this episode. Actually, when we were in like episode 3, I was like, we're going to see Ahsoka, we're going to see Leia, we're going to see the blue guy. Gosh, his name is slipping my mind right now. I was like, we're going to see all these characters. It's going to build up to Ahsoka. Yeah. It's going to build up to that show in an awesome way. But there's only 2 episodes left. And to be honest, I don't think the next episode is going to be that great. If we're being honest, I think it's going to be on the same level of what we've been getting the rest of the show. I think the big episode of the show this season is going to be the final one. And I think they're going to be bringing Moff Gideon back, and we're going to find out. Oh my gosh, Bombardian or whatever, Jack Black's character, paid these mercenaries to free an ex-empire or an empire
Oh,
person
they
because
won't
he's
do
still
that.
sympathizing.
They won't do that because they
I
they
think they will.
knighted little Grogu, and
Well,
that
she
would that
did.
would,
She
that
did.
would that would ruin their reputation.
Well, she freed them. She did that, and I think Jack Black's character with what they're doing, because they portrayed her like a really kind of loving person. They haven't given her the best script or anything, but anything she's doing is loving. Like, can we be forgiveness? Like, come on, can we do all
Well,
this?
there is another
And when
character.
Grogu comes in,
There's another
she's like,
character
"Can I
we've been
hold the
introduced.
baby?"
Yeah, there is another
Literally.
character though we've been introduced multiple times that could actually do that, and that is somebody on Coruscant. So I'm more suspicious that character on our right will make a comeback before they try and do something with Jack Black's character. This very much felt like a cameo, like just put me in there because I want to be in the Star Wars universe. That's what it felt like.
I mean, they could be surprising me. They could be surprising me, but I don't think Disney is that creative at their writing. I think they're very straightforward. They're like, someone is paying the Mandalorians to go and free capture Moff Gideon, and the Mandalorians, this tribe that we have on Talazar, they will do whatever they are told to do if there's money involved. They're loyal to whoever's paying them money. And if the Palazar is paying them money to go free Moff Gideon, I don't think they really have any care that Moff Gideon was trying to attack Din Djarin or whatever and Grogu. Like, I don't think they'll care. So I think we will find out that maybe Moff Gideon is on this planet in the final episode. Or he's just freed and he went somewhere else. But I I do think
I think that's giving him
I
too
don't know
much
if
credit. Personally, I
I
think
don't
it's
know.
giving him too much credit. That sounds like Disney would actually have a plan. I don't think they have a plan, but we will find out very soon. So we don't know what to
I don't think
expect them,
Ahsoka's gonna get appearance.
but we
Maybe she will.
all we know is that Disney is trying to make these things connect together. It doesn't necessarily always work out so well, and I think we've kind of been introduced to that many times over in this series.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Jared says we'll see Thrawn in either the final scene or the post credits or of a
Yeah.
final episode. That's very likely. If it
Oh,
weren't for my son, I
oh,
would have stopped watching Star Wars a long time ago. He also mentions that Gideon will have a scene reporting back to Thrawn at the very
yeah.
last minute. That's very much a
That's what I
possibility.
was gonna say.
Well,
The
on
only
that
time we'd
note,
see Thrawn is if on the last scene, like we're seeing him finally getting back to safety or his safety with the Empire, and he's like crawling back. He's all dirty and like in a jail uniform type thing, and he comes into this room, main base type room in the ship, and it's Thrawn in there, and then that will build up to the Ahsoka show. But I do not think the next episode is going to be good. If I'm being honest, I think the last episode is what they're hoping will hit the nail.
well, on
But
that
yeah, I'll
note,
finish it off.
we are going to be wrapping this up. Thank you, everyone, for coming by. Thank you, Rolling Chairs, for helping out with this discussion. You give us some good insight into the world of the TV shows, which I, again, have not spent a whole lot of time spending researching. And so it kind of helps to know some of the lore that they're kind of pulling from. Because when I see it, I don't see a lot of a lot of those connections. And to me, I just see something's a bit more confusing. And so it's one of the reasons why the past seasons were so very confusing to me and why I didn't like them in even the slightest, because I couldn't draw that parallel. And now that I do know a little bit more, while I'm still not a fan of it, I can at least respect why they went about doing it the way that they did and can understand why there's the draw. On that note, thank you everyone for
Thanks for having me
coming
on.
by, and we will see you all next time when we go over the Mario movie discussion, which will be taking place tomorrow. So if you are inclined to hear it, listening on that, we're going to be doing that at I believe it is 6 p.m. Eastern time. And for those who are saying, why don't you advertise this stuff beforehand, a little bit beforehand, like a couple of days? Well, part of it is that we're still trying to get caught up. Going into discussions was very much kind of a last minute change in direction. So I'm still trying to like plan things out in advance, and it's kind of feels like I'm playing things out a day or two beforehand. So my apologies, everyone. All right, well, we will see you all next time. Have a nice day, everyone.
Bye.